Game of Thrones made its debut in 2011. It didn't instantly captivate millions of viewers, but it was noticed. Its presence was like a street performer, engaging in pantomime by the roadside. It didn't draw our undivided attention, yet we all found ourselves glancing its way at least once. Initially, its premise was anything but groundbreaking. It seemed not to promise anything new. The well-trodden tales of power struggles, replete with kings, queens, princesses, nobles, and grand palaces, were all too familiar. It was laden with all the absurdities through which aristocracy had once poisoned our world. But these elements were just the beginning. The narrative soon thickened with an abundance of sex, intrigue, fantasy elements, and dragons. At this point, it truly began to capture our attention. However, its first major breakthrough came towards the end of the first season, with the famous execution scene of Ned Stark. The death of our honorable, brave, and ideal character marked the moment the series truly began to appeal to us. The world was no longer a place for honorable and courageous individuals. The requisites of this new world were different. Honor and pride had become archaic concepts, and such individuals were to slowly fade away. If I were to ask what you loved most about Game of Thrones, you'd probably list a multitude of aspects. Its fantastic storyline, bold script, character development, unexpected plot twists, acting, cinematography, and much more. Indeed, in these respects, it was a magnificent series. But in my opinion, what we cherished most were the characters who thought of no one but themselves in pursuit of their goals and objectives. They acted without a trace of conscience and never felt any remorse for their actions. Their sleep remained undisturbed. We, too, were tired of the relentless effort of toiling over a project for months, of striving for financial gain through fair and honest means. We were seeking an excuse, an example, to escape this. That's when we noticed the characters of Game of Thrones, and internally we acknowledged, the world has changed. I must adapt to this new world. Everyone is doing it, and so we found our excuse. Now, for a promotion or merely a small salary increase, you could be the insider for your boss. For a sum of money, you could sell your own videos and photos online. And in the end, you need not feel bad about doing these things. In fact, you should take pride in them, because you are doing what is necessary to survive in this new world. Everyone is doing it. These are now the necessities of our era. Of course, these practices were not unprecedented or without any examples elsewhere. Everything didn't start with Game of Thrones. These are habits as old as humanity itself. However, before Game of Thrones, if you engaged in something unethical, you either had to claim it was for a higher purpose and market it as though it was actually a good deed, or you had to act as if you were ashamed, even if you didn't feel it. But now, we no longer needed to display any sign of a greater purpose or the slightest embarrassment. We found the example we needed in the fictional characters of Game of Thrones, and our love for the series continued to grow. All this was enough reason for us to adore it. But it did even more for us. This time, it presented us with the Red Wedding. Although the series' purpose was not this, it felt like a confirmation that we had made the right inference. The honorable and honest character, Ned Stark's son, shared his father's fate. And now, we could be sure, the world was not for these people. Times were changing. After receiving this confirmation, Game of Thrones became our closest confidant. We lavished it with adoration, elevating it to the status of the most significant event in the world, or acted as if it were so. For a while, everything seemed to be going well. Our spirits were high. Ned Stark's children endured various hardships, reinforcing our belief that there was no longer a place for honest and good people in this world. Even Jon Snow, another of Stark's sons, encountered death. Yet in a surprising turn, Game of Thrones made a move that caught us off guard. Jon Snow returned from the dead. Despite being described as honorable and good, Ned Stark's son was resurrected. Initially, everyone rejoiced at his return. But in my opinion, The joy stemmed from a delayed realization of what his resurrection truly implied. This return from death signified that Game of Thrones had tricked us. It had played a game with us. Honest, reliable, and good characters continued to live. They even returned from death. As this slowly became apparent, we were displeased, to say the least. We began to voice our complaints about the series, stating it was no longer as good as it once was. But our expression of hatred didn't emerge suddenly. After all, it had been our closest companion for a long time, and thus, hope lingered. It could still speak the truths we desired. As the finale loomed, it dawned on us that Game of Thrones would not serve our expectations. No matter how vocally we expressed our dissatisfaction, it refused to yield. This became increasingly clear with each episode. Our hatred grew, but deep down we thought, it's not over yet, there's still hope. But Daenerys' death was the last straw. The death of our character, who, due to circumstances, increasingly turned to evil and was driven to madness, was crucial. She wasn't this person at the beginning. It was the world that pushed her to this state. She was merely doing what was necessary to survive in this world. However, she was killed by Ned Stark's son, who had returned from the dead, by the very type of person we thought no longer had a place in this era. This was Game of Thrones' way of saying, I've tricked you all to us one last time. From that moment on, our hatred for the series became absolute. We seized every opportunity to express our anger towards it. We wrote everywhere that we disliked and disapproved of it, denying any previous praise we had for it. Our once closest ally had become one of our greatest adversaries. Despite various other reasons and differing opinions, I believe this was why most of us hated it. It had committed the ultimate betrayal against us. It seemed supportive at first. Then it waited and caught us at our most vulnerable moment. And it had caught us in such a vulnerable state that there was nothing we could do. Game of Thrones played us with a deception unmatched in television history. In a way no other production dared, it involved us in its story, all the while secretly mocking us beneath the surface. And it did so with such finesse that we only realized it after it had ended. It made us feel as if it was serving our desires, as if our justifications were being supported, thereby exposing our hypocrisy and selfishness. While we thought it was serving us, in reality, it turned us into its servants. In this regard, I believe it marked one of the coolest moves in recent times. It transcended being just a show we passively watched. It became an interactive experience. It transformed us, sitting in front of our screens at home, into extras in its narrative. Here at last, dear friends. On the shores of the sea comes the end of our fellowship in Westeros. Go in peace. I will not say, do not use the like button, for not all comments are an evil.